As we transition now to the Cigarroa Family STEM Medical Lecture Series, I see that there's more people in the audience now than there was at 8 a.m. I'm not trying to call anyone out, but we did say at the very, very beginning. In fact, for those of you who weren't here at the beginning, we started at 8:15, so to be sure. We started a little late, but we were also coordinating with our colleagues joining us across the country on Zoom. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat just a few things, logistic kind of items here that I want to get through. As a reminder, for those of you who don't already have it available on your devices or your laptops, you can scan this QR code for the conference program. You can download it that way directly on your phone or any device. You can also, by the way, find it directly from the AAHHE website. If you go to our homepage, there'll be a link there. You can just download it straight up, and it's a low resolution file, so it's not going to take up too much bandwidth to download it. There's also, I know, Wi-Fi, so there's signage in the back that can give you the access code for that if you need access for that. And of course, you'll keep getting reminders throughout the conference about upcoming special features and lectures and whatnot. We are live streaming most of our sessions. And then please do not forget to scan, post, share on social media using AAHHE.org or hashtag AAHHE22. I said earlier also, you can find the facilities outside. We have men's and women's restrooms as well as all gender restrooms around the corner. In fact, every building will have all those facilities available for all of us today. All right. One other housekeeping thing that is new. One other QR code, and this is new. We're going to keep flashing this throughout the conference, and we'll also send you an email about it. We already had our first session, right? So with that means the first availability or opportunity for feedback. We would love to have it. So you can get used to kind of tagging this. We're going to keep using this same link over and over again for all of our sessions. So go ahead and pull out your devices if you don't have them, or if you don't already have them out, to snap the QR code. It worked for me. Hopefully it works for you. Just zoom all the way in or something. Can I get a thumbs up if it's working from anybody? All right. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you all. We value your feedback. We appreciate the time you take to give us that feedback. And I want to again thank the Conference Plan Committee for their efforts in getting us situated with that. And again, we'll flash this on the screen over and over again. If you want to take a quick photo and show it to your buddy, you can also, do it that way as well. All right, next slide. All right, it is now my honor to welcome to the podium my dear colleague on the board of directors and our treasurer of the board for the last 2 years, Dean Carmen Martinez Lopez is Dean of the School of Business and Professional Careers at Westchester Community College within the SUNY system. She has been a true stalwart leader, fiscal agent for our organization, and in executing her fiduciary responsibilities, I can say that I can think of no better person to lead the organization than Dean Carmen Martinez Lopez. Carmen.
Good morning. Thank you, Victor, for that. I love amo a mis latinos y latinas. Buenos días a todos. The AAHHE 6th Cigarroa Family Medical STEM distinguished lecture spotlights a prominent and established scholar or leader in the medical or science disciplines. The lecture is named in honor of the Cigarroa Family of Laredo, Texas, and it is 3 generations of medical doctors and active leaders who have served in their communities and in the national organizations. Dr. Francisco Cigarroa, born in Laredo, Texas, and a 3rd generation physician, earned a bachelor's degree in biology from Yale University in 1979. and a medical degree from the University of Texas Southeastern Medical Center at Dallas in 1983. At this moment, listen, you have to listen, please. At this moment, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jessica Esquivel. Welcome, Dr. Jessica Esquivel. Dr. Jessica Esquivel has recently been promoted to an associate scientist at Fermi Lab, where she works in the Muon G2 experiments. You are going to understand that later, directly from her. Thank you. She's one of 100 Black women with a PhD in physics in this country. Could you believe that? Be prepared for more information coming from her. The second Black woman to graduate with a PhD in physics from Syracuse University, located where? In the great state of New York. And the third Black woman to hold an associate scientist position at Fermi Lab. She identifies as female, Black, Mexican, lesbian, a physicist, and Texan from the Rio Grande Valley. From McAllen, Texas. Dr. Esquivel is a recognized advocate for creating just and equitable spaces in physics and focuses on the interaction of race, gender, and sexuality in her community engagement effort. She is a member of the AAAS, co-founder of Black in Physics, part of the Change Now Collective, and is an AAAS if then ambassador. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jessica Esquivel.
Let's see. Okay, let me take this off. Whew. All right, that always makes me sound so fancy. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So it really does feel like coming home. I mean, I don't think I ever thought that I would be getting an invited lecture like this ever. It's not something that I think you dream about when you're a kid. The fact that, you know, Cigarroa family is from Laredo really does hit home, literally. My mom is a nurse. She used to be a healthcare nurse. And I remember my sister and I in the backseat of her car as she traveled to Laredo because she had a starter care appointment. And I don't actually even know what starter care means, but I remember, you know, sitting in the car, or remember, you know, on the weekends, my mom saying, oh, we got to go to Laredo again. And that's kind of a trek from McAllen. So it really does feel amazing to be in this room with so many familia, hearing, you know, Spanish, hearing my community and the city that I grew up in. So just know that this means a lot. Yeah, got that out of the way. So usually these invited lectures, you know, you talk about oneself and your accomplishments and how awesome you are, right? And you kind of revel in that glow that everybody's just in awe of you. But full disclosure, there's a monkey on my back called imposter syndrome. And no matter how hard I try and shake that little monkey off, it just hangs on for dear life, right? So I wanted to acknowledge that at the onset of this. I wanted to name it, and I also wanted to recognize that it's a symptom of a bigger issue. We're in a world where race-based stressors, from individual to systemic, are prevalent, and our academic spaces, our academic ivory towers don't shield us from that. In fact, in STEM fields, they exacerbate these stressors. And research shows that dealing with the constant bombardment of these stressors leads to declining mental and physical health. It leads to an overall decline of self-efficacy and of self-esteem. So I want to acknowledge that imposter syndrome is an effect of race-based stressors. And even though logically, I know that I've moved mountains to be standing in front of you, every day I constantly question my worth as a scientist. Every day I constantly question my accomplishments. And I question if I've garnered them because of someone's pity, or if my intersectional identities was just palatable enough for the white supremacist patriarchal STEM landscape. So in the vein of being transparent and authentic, and that's the only way I know how to do things, I will not go into depth on why I'm such a badass. But rather, I want to begin the conversation on radical imagination and delve into how we can transform the culture of physics and STEM more broadly so that the next generation of Black, Latinx, Indigenous, queer, gender nonconforming peoples in STEM won't constantly question their self-efficacy and won't question their place in STEM. I'm gonna try and make this short though, so that we can also have a conversation about my life, about my journey, about how I got to where I am, but that will be in the Q&A portion. And I really do wanna delve into this question or this concept of radical imagination. So these are the two talking points that I'm going to be discussing. And the theme of this conference really did speak to me, and I definitely lifted some of these talking points from the theme, and we're just gonna really lean in. So I want to caveat that this is my experience of going through this journey and falling into activism because of the landscape, because of the culture that I was traversing. And gaining experience with developing informal physics learning programs or exhibits. And I do want to highlight that there are much more folks in the audience that are expert in this field. I am a particle physicist, and I always say, I didn't go into the field to clean up a mess that I didn't make. But for me to survive in that field, I had to pick up some new skills. I had to become a change agent, and I had to push for transformational change just so I could do the physics that I wanted to do. So I do want to acknowledge y'all are way more expert in this, and this is just my experience. So before we start, I think it's important to kind of highlight the language that we're going to be using, because language is important. And through my journey, understanding language like imposter syndrome, like implicit bias, like stereotype threat, really did validate the experiences that I was going through, really did validate the traumas that I was being, pushed into, and it made me feel less crazy about what I was going through. So the first term that I want to talk about is queer. And that, like I said, I'm a lesbian, so it does feel very a part of me, this word. But this is the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition. Queer, differing in some way from what is usual or normal. So let's sit with that, right? There's many forms of the definition of queer, but this is the one that I want you to kind of hold on to. And the next one is queering. To disrupt normative processes, to disrupt definitions and categories. I always say I'm in the business of conflict because change doesn't happen unless there's that friction of conflict. And this is where queering comes in. So the first step into queering STEM and reimagining what that looks like by using storytelling. And I've always been a storyteller. I mean, that's, I think, embedded in the Latino culture, right? Like we always use hyperboles and exaggerate, and the amount of people you tell, that story gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So, that's deeply rooted in who I am as a storyteller. But in the field of physics, so often we are told to leave ourselves out of science, that it's subjective, that you want to leave the humanity out of it because we are in the business of data and numbers, right? But obviously that's not true. Science is a human endeavor. We are wanting to know where we came from, how we came to be, why the earth is the way it is. They are human questions that we're trying to answer. And it's a human endeavor to search for the secrets of the universe or develop the next innovations of society. So understanding the humans behind those endeavors can paint a much clearer picture of not only why we are so interested in these mysteries, but also how we go about solving them. I'm a Black Mexican lesbian, neurodivergent, that's a new one. I didn't know I had ADHD until a couple of months ago. Particle physicist. I am a wife, a fierce advocate for justice and equity in STEM, a community engager, and a science communicator. This is the lens that I see the world through, and hence how I do my science. So social justice has always been embedded in my understanding of physics. In college, I went to St. Mary's University of San Antonio, Texas. So in college, you couldn't be a physics major unless you took a course called Fiesta Physics. And this course you needed to take every semester. And essentially that's what it was. It was a physics party. And what I learned there was how to engage with my community, how to meet them where they are with strengths-based approaches, informal physics learning, and show them the opportunities that were available to them. We brought them being low income, historically marginalized populations, usually middle schoolers, it was a lot of fun, to the university. We showed them the amazing things physicists do with physics experiments. And we also showed them around the campus so they could also begin to visualize themselves on that land, on that ground at the campus. And at the time, I wasn't aware what I was doing, right? I was a college student. My advisor, my mentor, my sponsor, he knew what he was doing, right? He knew that there weren't people that looked like me in this field and that it was important for me to be highly visible for those kids to see me, but I didn't know that. I was just a young college student having fun with the kids, right? And it wasn't until later on in my career that I realized that that was that intersection of social justice and STEM. That was already embedded in what I thought physics was early on. The intersections of social justice and STEM are still a part of how I do physics. Now I'm intentionally focused on transformational change and of using my voice to shed light on deeply rooted injustices in my field. These are some of the initiatives that I'm a part of. The first one is the AAAS If Then Ambassadorship, AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Sciences. And this again, really got me, my monkey imposter syndrome, kicking up. What this ambassadorship does is focuses on being visible role models in STEM to middle school girls. And this past weekend, the 120 ambassadors, myself included, were actually flown out by AAAS to Washington, D.C., because there are 120 statues of us celebrating women in STEM that just got unveiled on the National Mall at the Smithsonian. Yeah. So, I mean, I do this work day in and day out. And like I said, I fell into being a change agent, being an activist for survival. And it's situations like that, it's, memories like that that really kind of take you out of the grind of the survival and see the impact that you have. I'm not gonna cry. But yeah, anyways, that's one of the initiatives that I do. And I would say that it's a bit different than the other three, right? Because it focuses on being highly visible. It focuses on meeting the middle school girls, where they consume their media, where they usually hang out. And it's highly focused on representation and recruitment. But as I've said, these physics halls, these physics buildings, they weren't built for somebody that looks like me. So not only do we need to be focusing on representation and recruitment, we also need to be focusing on retention. And that's where the other three of my initiatives come into play. APS IDEA, Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Alliance. That is an alliance, a network of 99 physics institutions across the country of change agents, community engagers, activists within those departments that come together and learn about social justice, learn about social science tools and activist tools to then become change agents in their organizations and push for transformational change within the physics culture. I'm a steering committee member on that one, and I've really enjoyed this organization because I've been able to find language for the experiences that I've gone through. I've been able to look at research-based, articles to understand the experiences that I've gone through and then be able to articulate that with language to other people. And I think that has just been a really powerful experience for me. The next initiative is called BlackInPhysics, which I am a co-founder of. And this is a grassroots movement that spawned up from the civil unrest in our country that was happening in 2020. There is not a lot of Black physicists. There's not a lot of Latinx physicists. When you start looking at the intersections of race and gender, the numbers get like ridiculously small. And what we were seeing was that we were going through collective trauma, right? Like we were seeing Black people get killed by cops regularly. And the institutions that we belong to, the organizations, the departments, the national laboratories, were silent. Nobody was acknowledging the trauma, the grief that we were going through. So BlackInPhysics spawned from that. It was a way to bring together the Black physicists that were siloed across the country in different, institutions and departments, so that we can come together and grieve as a community, so that we can come together and find joy as a community. And this has been one of the biggest things that I've ever been a part of. And I think what I want you all to take from that is that we didn't have money. We weren't part of a big university or national laboratory. We saw a need and early careers, came together and we built that. We built that. Now, organizations have recognized the importance and the need of an organization like this, and the importance and the need of an organization that looks through an intersectional lens, and have, backed us and have supported us. But this came from the brains of youngins like myself. And what I think was really impactful about BlackInPhysics was that everybody that was a part of BlackInPhysics Week were paid for their work, were paid for their expertise, and were paid for their knowledge. And we didn't know how we were going to do it. We just knew how important it was that Black physicists weren't getting overextended or overtapped for the expertise, their lived experience that they were bringing to our community. And we did it. Every single person is paid in our organization. Lastly, we have Change Now. And Change Now was a direct outcome of the silence at Fermi Lab. Listen, I'm just gonna call it. You can, go to our website and read more about our FAQs, but Fermi Lab has 5 Black scientists. None of them were tenured. And all of us were seeing the lack of support that the institution was giving us. So we came together, we developed a research-based strategic plan, and we essentially forced the institution to recognize and to go through a reckoning of the fact that they weren't retaining us, that they weren't creating a space, a querencia, right, where we could thrive. And it was shown in the numbers. And as a postdoc at the time, I was putting my job on the line, right? I'm a part of a Department of Energy National Laboratory, and I am stirring some, what? But change doesn't happen by being complacent, right? Change doesn't happen by waiting. If you need to get things done, you get them done. And that's what we did. So there's this illusion of physics, that it's a culture of no culture, right? That we're above social justice issues of the time, that we're objective and robotic, and that we leave our humanity at home, right? Once we put that lab coat on, or once we go into the laboratory, we're just robots. But we all know that that's not the case. That's not true. We can't leave humanity at home. And the reality of the fact is that physics culture is toxic. It's built on individualism, on competitiveness, on masculine aggression, on anti-Blackness, on sexism, on homophobia. And this isn't the physics culture that I want to leave behind. And I have resources for y'all to read. Being Times and Lifetimes by Sharon Treweek. She was a social scientist who followed American and Japanese high energy physicists for years to suss out what the culture is. And it's mind opening. And then there's also the Team Up report written by the American Institute of Physics, which highlights the factors of success and the factors that are missing in physics for Black physicists to succeed in the field. So BIPOC are being pushed out because of the toxicity in the field. 20% of PhD physicists are women. That's pretty much the international average across countries. 2% of those women are Black. I literally can count the amount of Black physicists that I've seen going through this journey. And there's actually a website called the African American Women in Physics website, Black Women in Physics, that details numbers, people that have been able to get a PhD in physics, that have survived that journey. The fact that it's numbers, right? The fact that it's that small is just ridiculous. And I think it underscores that toxicity, the fact that we're getting pushed out. To delve deeper into those numbers, this gives you a 2-year average from 1997 to 2012 of Black and Latinx individuals who earned a PhD in physics. And I want to highlight the y-axis because, you know, I'm about numbers. Those are numbers. Those aren't percentages. Those aren't, you know, add 100 to that, multiply 1,000. No, those are numbers. And you can see that the trend actually for Black students, Black scholars, it went down, right? And it's actually now, when you look at, you know, 12 to 2018, it's flatlined and started to go down. But I also want to kind of highlight that this is a very binary plot, right? Like, where do I fit into this? Am I being double counted? Am I not being counted at all? Like, even the collection of the data to inform the lack of representation in our fields is off. We're not looking at it through an intersectional lens. And I think that's really, really important to be able to gauge the actual issue that's happening in our field. On top of that, there's also the added tax on Black queer scientists. And we saw that a lot in 2020, when these institutions were going through a reckoning and they were realizing, holy, we don't know what we're doing. We know we're doing something bad, but we don't know how to fix it. Let's tap our only Black queer scientists, our only Black scientists, our only BIPOC scientists, and have them fix the mess that we created, right? We were being over-tapped, and that was causing burnout. Our voices were expected to be the voices of all the, you know, the whole marginalized group. And I've already showed you that I don't even fit in the data, right? I don't even fit in the data that they've collected, but I'm supposed to speak on behalf of the Black community. I'm supposed to speak on behalf of the Latinx community. And, you know, we aren't a monolith. And then on top of that, these, what my field calls service tasks, they were going, you know, uncompensated, unacknowledged, and unrewarded. They weren't helping me succeed in my career. They were actually detrimental. But the institution was essentially using us, right? So with that, you know, just giving out tidbits of information, things that I've learned, be strategic in the initiatives that you take on and negotiate for compensation. I know that's like taboo, like we don't want to be talking about money, but compensation can be other forms, right? It can be making sure that these types of service work goes into, what's it called? When you're up for promotion, that they're looking at that and that they're putting, you know, value to that work, right? Make sure that your voice is actually being heard and that they're valuing that work that you're doing, and leverage that hypervisibility for more meaningful and prominent work. And like I said, choose initiatives that amplify your voice. Oh. Okay, so let's get back to the power of queering, right? The power of queering allows you radical imagination. And it's an individual, collective act of envisioning the world that we want to live in. And that seems really hard, right? Like, how do I do that when we're like knee deep in all of these injustices? How do I get out of survival mode and start radically imagining the world that I actually want to live in, the world that I want my kids to grow up in? While it does seem very hard, we don't have to start from scratch. Shows like Star Trek, movies like Black Panther, they give us a pathway towards radical imagination. They show us what Africa would look like if it wasn't pillaged, right? It shows Afrofuturism and the amazing ways Black people could have succeeded and created amazing technology if it weren't for colonialism. So I'm gonna show you an example. Let's see if it'll work. of what radical imagination can be. Have any of y'all seen Schitt's Creek? Okay. As a queer person, this scene really did like, oh, it could be that easy, right? It could be that easy. So if you've seen Schitt's Creek, you know that it's this small little town in podunk nowhere where you would assume that it would be relatively, I don't know why I'm hearing, is everybody hearing that? Hello? I can back up. Hello? Okay. Where you would assume that everybody would be relatively conservative, never have met like a gay person in their life, but you see this radical imagination of what it could be. Just a conversation over wine, right? And that's it, and we move on, and it's not a big deal. And that to me, you know, constantly having to come out is a really, really big deal. And here I want to kind of lean into that radical imagination and talk about our history, right? On the right, you're seeing the firsts. And I want to highlight Dr. Jedidah Eisler and Dr. Brooke Russell. Dr. Eisler graduated from Yale in astronomy in 2014, 138 years later from Edward Boucher the first. Brooke Russell, Dr. Russell, graduated from Yale in physics in 2020, 144 years later. So these are our firsts, and what they have done is phenomenal. What they have done is amazing. But I also want us to question, who is a scientist, right? These are the first from a definition of colonial scientists, right? What colonialism has defined as being an important scientist. But this photo right here is actually from a book by Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein, and if you haven't read it, just read it. And she questions who is a scientist. And she says, my whole life I had assumed that there were no scientists in my family's history. But then I realized that in fact I had no idea. And this image is the first image that you see when you open the book. And it's two slaves actually doing science. And it's so freaking powerful, right? To really radically imagine who a scientist is, what science does, what scientists do, and really start pushing, queering, right? STEM. So in queering STEM, you know, and reimagining the role of a scientist and questioning of who a scientist is and what they do, a re-envisioning of STEM education is needed. And it needs to be taught through a social justice intersectional lens. And this direct opposition of the status quo will not be easy and will require constant re-evaluation. And this quote right here, I'm pretty sure I pulled from one of the articles that was on the conference theme site. And it says, there have been several studies that have shown that Black students in particular, and students of color more broadly, tend to pursue careers that are going to allow them to have some sort of social justice orientation. And this is also true for Black physicists. In that team up report, one of the factors that came to blow it up to the top was that Black students were looking for careers, for majors that they can turn around and use to help better their community. It's there, right? In black and white. We need to be teaching STEM education through a social justice lens. You know, the tools that I use as a particle physicist, one being machine learning, right? I am using it to study these ghostly particles called neutrinos, or look into science beyond our understanding. But those same skills, that same tools that I use in particle physics can be directly translated onto social justice issues. I can use machine learning to understand traffic patterns in the barrio, right? And kind of go with data, with, you know, hard facts, and say to policymakers that because of X, Y, and Z, we're having difficulties in ABC, you know? And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that I see, like aha moments when I'm talking to kids, when I'm talking to middle school, high school, college students, is that they don't recognize that those same tools you can turn around and use to help your community. So like I said, it's not going to be easy. We're going against the status quo, right? And reimagining, radical imagination is never easy. But we must reckon with the notion that as an institution, we have to become accountable for the complacency and recommit to combating economic, social, political, and educational inequities. And this is one of my favorite quotes, and this is also some of the research that I've learned through APS IDEA, is from the experts, right? Saul Alinsky, who is the founder of community organizing. And, you know, as a physicist, this really speaks to me. Change means movement. Movement means friction. And only in the frictionless vacuum of a non-existent abstract world can movement or change occur without that abrasive friction of conflict. And this is why I say I'm in the business of making conflict. So even though it's going to be hard, imagine the possibilities. What would it look like to decolonize physics, to value humanity over productivity, and to be cognizant of how our research will be consumed in the greater society? What would happen if we took time to learn, to think, to heal? How would that affect the future of physics? It may slow down the potential discovery of dark matter. It may also create a culture more conducive to learning for all. A culture where people feel welcome and want to contribute. And at the end of the day, dark matter isn't going anywhere. So in Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein's book, she also highlights this quote by Alice Walker. And it states, "The gift of loneliness is sometimes a radical vision of society or one's people that has not previously been taken into account. And the fact that our loneliness, being queer, being gender nonconforming, being Latinx or Black, gives us and affords us this radical vision should be valued. And when reflecting on our worth, we should hold steadfast to this. This was a buoy for me, the fact that all of that isolation and loneliness that I have felt has built me to be a radical imaginator." How am I doing on time? Going a little slow. So I actually want to take a beat now and go on our own journey of radical imagination. So if you take a picture of this thingy-mabobber, QR code, and I think you can click it. So for those that can't get the QR code. Oh. Perfect. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes and we're going to see the answers pop up on the screen to answer this question. What are values that we want to guide the world we want to live in? And what would it look like for academic institutions to match the values of our radically imagined world? Yeah. Amor, I love it. I think transparency is really important. Awesome. So I think I can leave this open while I open up the next question. Oh, I can't, I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so what identity-related experiences are common in academia? And I can start being the first, having my name mispronounced, questioning my expertise, right? Spokesperson, yeah, definitely. Microaggressions, definitely. Tokenizing, Okay, and I'm gonna ask you one more question. What experiences do we want to be common? Being able to exist, powerful. Yep. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this last question open for y'all to continue filling in. And also on that same link, there's a Q&A portion that you can drop questions in. If we don't get to them, I'll definitely answer them offline. So let's go to part 2, and I'm gonna speed through it. And this one, I want to hit on mentorship, self-care, and mental health. So again, I pulled this quote from the amazing theme. Gerencia is a place where one feels safe, a place from which one's strength of character is drawn, where one feels at home. And I really do hold steadfast to that in my mentorship. So I want to touch on this quote right here. High potential women are over-mentored and under-sponsored relative to their peers. Now, what does that mean, right? What's the difference between mentorship and sponsorship? So mentors will sit, advise, encourage, and help you along the way. But sponsors, those are the ones that will bring you under their wing. They will stick their necks out for you and vouch for you and put their names on the line. And as I progress in my career, I recognize how important it is to be a sponsor or champion. I want to create a space of gerencia where those that work with me feel safe, at peace, and at home. It's important to work collaboratively to create these spaces and leverage shared leadership. And for my interns, I create a safe space once a week for feedback to be given and to be received. I ask them what worked that week, what I could have done better, and what they need me to do next week for them to succeed. I also ask them how they are doing outside of work, because we are humans, right? I ask them what stressors may be affecting their progress, and if there is anything that I can do to be a buffer. And this form of mentorship gives agency to my interns and teaches them to be confident in asking for what they need and to recognize spaces that have been built for them with intentional care. So speaking on care, let's talk about self-care. And I think we may have all heard of this quote, right? Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. I think it's important to protect one's peace. And that's why I talked about, making sure that you're taking initiatives where they value your voice, making sure that you're working at institutions where their goals, their guiding principles align with yours. I think it's also important to center one's physical and mental health and deprioritize productivity. And that flies against what America is, right? And all of these concepts are radical re-envisioning of a scientist's priorities and directly combats colonial time and capitalism. So what is colonial time? When it comes to scientific endeavors, technology development, productivity, there is this inherent time pressure. It must be done now, right? Colonial time centers productivity over humanity. It commodifies Black bodies to meet said time pressure. It has historically been seen in the context of slavery and now in the prison industrial complex and within our academic spaces as we churn out statements like diversity will increase productivity out of the industrial ED&I mill. Colonial time creates academic cultures focused on perpetually increasing productivity And that was ever so prevalent in 2020 when my institution's main success of the year was that we increased our productivity. During COVID, during civil unrest in our country, during an insurrection and deaths of over 500,000 people, my dad included. This notion of colonial time is deeply embedded in our academic culture and deeply toxic. But this imposed time pressure evaporates when we're discussing transformational change, dismantling white supremacist structures, and creating an anti-racist institution. Time then begins to move in slow motion, if it's moving at all. And the statement that we hear time and time again is that change takes time. So what happened to that fervor we applied to studying the cosmos, for looking for dark matter or hunting for neutrinos? As physics is a microcosm of society, I put this quote by our first deputy director, Goldwasser, as a reminder that scientists need to be more than mere spectators of the crisis which grip our society. The last thing I want to talk about is mental health. And during 2020, I was seeing email after email from my institution discussing the mental health repercussions of working from home, right? And email after email from my bosses checking in on making sure that I'm okay with teleworking and that I'm not becoming isolated, right? But no emails discussing the mental health of its Black practitioners, on how we were dealing with the collective trauma and grief of the time. And it was really a stark contrast to see that in physics, maybe in most STEM fields, we don't talk about mental health, that's taboo. I mean, in my cultures, that's taboo, right? But to see that once it was affecting white physicists, that mental health became the topic of conversation in every meeting and every email that I was getting from, institution higher ups, and that they were intentionally silent about the mental wellness of their Black practitioners was just mind-boggling. And, sorry, next slide. Oops. Yeah, and then knowing these statistics, right? Knowing that Black people are 200% more likely to know somebody who had died from COVID-19. And the fact that lack of representation is rampant in every field. And when you're looking at, mental health experts, that there are less than 2% of American Psychological Association members that are Black, the cards were being stacked against us. And it was the fact that they were silent, the fact that we were dealing with such insurmountable issues that really did bring upon a change now, and really did start the conversation at my institution about how to support its Black physicists. So I leave you with this. Queering STEM means creating an intentional safe space to discuss topics related to mental health, related to neurodiversity, and radically imagining a future where our STEM workforce is inclusive of neurodiverse and disabled people. In that vein, I share my journey with mental wellness. After my dad's passing, I fell into a really deep depression. So much so that I wasn't able to get any work done, like nothing was clicking, right? I battled with focus and attentiveness, forgetfulness pretty much all my life, but I thought it was just a quirk of the Tijerina family. And with that onset of depression though, even the most mundane things were becoming too hard a task to complete. And in November of 21, who knows time, right? I sought out help for my depression and found out that I also had ADHD. And it was only a couple of months ago that I got the strength to actually go through the testing and get an official diagnosis. And I'm still learning what ADHD actually looks like for me. But I do see similarities between my symptoms and the chaos that is quantum mechanics, which is fascinating, right? I love quantum, right? I'm recognizing that a lot of these symptoms are what actually made me a good scientist in the first place. And there's research that shows that ADHD folks are more creative or better at conceptual expansion. And this creativity allowed me to be able to visualize and study literally the invisible and to communicate such abstract research. And my hyperfocus, which is also a symptom of ADHD, which sounds counterintuitive, but it is, allowed me to focus on really complex problems for long stints of time. And the fact that my brain jumps from topic to topic allowed me to go from thought to thought seamlessly in and out of different topics and allowed me to approach problems from different vantage points. And I like to say that my brain acts like a quantum computer, where my thoughts are qubits. And it's an amalgamation of everything between 0 and 1 in superposition with each other. And we're going into the quantum realm, right? That's literally where we are headed. And it's completely different and unlike the binary computer, which is rigid and only does zeros or ones. So I want to say that diverse voices matter. And again, highlighting on the fact that we may have a quantum brain, and there's actually a physicist named Michael Fisher who is on this interdisciplinary journey of figuring out whether or not we in fact do have quantum brains. And this journey came from his struggle with depression and his acceptance towards getting mental health and recognizing the fog kind of just lifting after he was in therapy and after he started taking medicine. So it's really important that we have people like me, like you all, neurodiverse, disabled folks at the seat of the table, because we literally think differently. And if we are wanting to go to the next stage of our world, we need people that think differently. Thank you. So I said I was going to be short, but it didn't happen. Hopefully we have time for just a couple of questions, maybe.
One of the comments that really stuck with me was when you said colonialism has decided what a real scientist looks like and what they do. Change in that paradigm causes friction and conflict. I thought that was beautiful, but I think you could also, instead of saying scientist, say what a real professor looks like, what a real dean,
Definitely.
what a real provost looks like, what a real president looks like. I think we have to challenge ourselves.
Definitely. Definitely. Very well said. I am. Yeah, yeah. I hear you. And yeah. And that's why I highlighted the importance of self-care. And that's something that I'm still learning. And my wife can attest that I work way too damn much. But surrounding yourself with people that recognize that you work too much, right? Surrounding your people that will remind you to drink water, that will remind you to eat, that will remind you to take a break, I think is really, really important. And like in, the talk about mentors, I think it's also important for those that are in power, traditional forms of power, right? Because I would like to throw that away with the bathwater as well, to act as like a stopgate for these, you know, productivity over humanity type mentalities. And I really do take that to heart, especially the fact that, you know, my interns in 2020 were BIPOC, and civil unrest and what am I trying to, I'm forgetting. but the fact that all of that was happening literally right outside their house, their window, and they were, you know, expected to come and perform as if it was any other day. And that was the time where I needed to step up and say, no, if anything needs to get to my intern, it needs to go through me, and I will decide whether or not they need to know it. And that's when people of power need to step up and say, I care about this student as a person, not just as a robot, as a scientist. Yeah. 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 And I think, yeah, that's such a great question. And I think that's where I've like grown into being a change agent or being an activist. That's such a weird word for me to say. But when I was young and naive, I thought it was all about representation. I thought it was all about recruitment. Just get them in, and you know, that critical mass will change everything. But we're seeing that that's not the case, right? Historically, that hasn't been the case. So I spend a lot of my time and effort really trying to create transformational change within this, you know, the spaces that I'm in, because to me, it's unethical to bring people that look like me into spaces that I know are toxic, into spaces that I know that are just gonna whittle them down. You know, I can't do that, so I don't. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, one more time for Dr. Wow. Two inspiring lectures this morning. And it's only the start.